Chief Perot? Mic 4. 2?
Camera?
No, we're out.
No?
We're out.
So we've allowed Adam Fiddler to return to the room?
Thanks, Brian. It's his twin. Yes, Jackie, it's your agenda item, IPCO Federal Court Challenge.
Yes.
There you go, girl.
Thanks, Vera. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to introduce our next session, which will be led by members of the Tri-Coalition, supported by legal counsel Julian Faulkner, to present on the journey of equitable Indigenous policing and the importance of unity in saying no to the status quo. I'll turn it over to Julian to provide brief introductions on the speaker and then over to our speakers. Thank you. I don't see that.
No, somebody wanted this to go first before all of that, but we'll put it back where it was if we're not sure. We're looking for Julian. Oh. Okay, we're going to give Jackie 1 minute to find Julian. We'll see if our technology works. Okay, it looks like Jackie has her team.
Is that you? Hey, are you on this panel? Well, yeah. Yes. Thought you were coming back to take another swing with me.
I wouldn't tease you if I didn't care.
So no Julian? Okay, so you're back here or down this row? You can take it up there.
Is that him? All right.
Appreciate it.
She's already introduced you, and then Jackie introduced you. You're on.
Chiefs, proxies, Grand Chiefs, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to hear from the panel that's going to speak to you today about what we've called finding safety. I want to start, though, by acknowledging the sacred items in the room, and in particular the drum, and the elders in the room, and women and youth advisors as well. I want to acknowledge that we're on the territory of the Mississauga, the Credit, and those that came before him, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Julian Faulkner. I'm legal counsel, and I hope we can be friends even though I'm a lawyer. I have the honor of being asked to moderate, and people ask me to do that usually so I don't talk as much. So I'll try to do my job and merely open and initiate issues so that you can hear the journey of the three police services who have decided that unity and just saying no to Canada and Ontario was the way for them, and they wanted to talk to you about their journey, and in particular talk to you about their success in the court, most recently in the federal court, and the new orders they've gotten from the court, and the challenges they faced in getting equitable policing. To open the topic, everyone should appreciate that the journey of UCCM Police Service, Treaty 3 Police Service, and APS Police Service is not unique in terms of the FNIPP policing program. The journey of these three services is a journey being faced by each and every one of you, regardless if it's a standalone police service, whether you're using OPP services through OFNPA, or otherwise. You all are governed by this notion of terms and conditions under the FNIPP policy. The idea of today's presentation is to identify Canada's playbook in enforcing these terms and conditions, which are blatantly racist and discriminatory and have kept Indigenous leadership and their people down in terms of ensuring safety. That's the topic, and the theme is unity. How these three services got together to just say no. So with that, I'm going to ask the two chiefs of police to start, and Chief James Killeen, he's the chief of police of UCCM, but he is also the vice president of the Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario. James?
I'm back. So this is a little different from this morning.
but it goes along the same lines in terms of supporting each other. So when I first joined UCCM, I realized shortly after joining there, we were coming up to the end of our agreement. We started looking at the problems that we have with our funding agreement, and we realized that there was issues going on amongst other police services, and our agreements were expiring at the same time. So the UCCM, APS, and Treaty 3 Police pledged to work together when their funding agreements all expired in March of 2023. This tri-coalition that we formed recognized that while we each serve communities with unique needs, the overarching challenges amongst the three remain the same. And that was inadequate funding and resourcing to ensure culturally responsive policing. So the strength of the creation of that tri-coalition between the three police services allowed us to share information with one another and maintain consistent messaging with Canada and Ontario in respect of our funding negotiation discussions. So historically, Canada has relied on a divide and conquer strategy. And that was very apparent in First Nation policing. There was an overriding idea that if you fought back, they would shut down your police service. And that was a fear that was very real. It was real amongst the officers and staff within my organization, and it wasn't unique just to UCCM. It was unique. It was specific and unique to all First Nations police. They all, as you start to speak to other officers and other staff, you realize that this has gone on for a long time. A feeling of fear that they're going to shut you down if you don't agree with discriminatory agreements. The Tri-Coalition also had support from the political leadership of the communities they served. So for UCCM, I met with all 6 of my community, my First Nation chiefs, and I said to them, you know, the police service gets criticized for not providing the services that everybody wants, and we get blamed for that. I have hard-working officers. I have hard-working civilian staff. We're working with what we have. And it is not our fault that we are in the position that we are in. We are in the position we're in because of inadequate funding and resourcing. And I need you to stand behind me and help fight for this. And that is exactly what we did. And then when we joined APS and Treaty 3, that strength of all 3 services refusing to sign became stronger and stronger. There was a threat of shutting down our police service. That started April 1st of this year, the first day of our agreement expiring. And they cut off our funding. The federal government cut off the funding. And to ask how unique that is, I want you to think of this. Have you ever heard anywhere on the news of a provincial police service or a municipal police service having their funding cut off? Have you ever heard something like Sudbury is no longer going to have the Greater Sudbury Police Service as of April 1st? You've never heard that. You've never heard it said with Toronto Police or any other major municipality. Those cities would be in a massive panic if that was going on. So that's how unique it is to First Nation policing. That does not exist. There's 4 levels of policing in Canada. You have federal policing, which is the RCMP and military. You have provincial, which is the OPP and the Sûreté de Québec. You have every municipal police service, and then you have First Nation policing. And on the national, federal level, provincial level, municipal level, no one has ever been threatened to have their funding cut off because they didn't agree to an agreement or any kind of funding that the chief of police or the police service didn't agree with. So I just want you to keep that in mind. That is how discriminatory this is. No other police service except First Nations Police Service has experienced this. I'm going to pass it over to Chief Sky.
Good afternoon. I want to start by saying, when we talk about systemic racism through this whole entire process, that started at the very highest level, and you wonder how that filters down to other governments. And this is a prime example of that. Very disappointed on how we were treated. And I want to thank my board and my 16 communities for supporting this cause, because it made a difference, and it's going to continue to make a difference. And obviously the other two police services. And the challenges that we face as police services are unique right across the country. They're all the same challenges. And it is why I want to say here today that this has been tried many, many times by all the officers, our past officers, and some of them aren't here today, that really took up this cause many, many times, and I think would be very proud of all of us for, getting this moved, and they would be very proud of the ruling that happened in July. And I want to say that because it's very important to those individuals, because they lived through this too. And we wanted to start sending a message, and we traveled to Ottawa, the three police chiefs, as the picture shows, and we went on their turf, the federal government's turf at the Parliament building. And with the help of the NDP, Carol Hughes and Lori Eidlout, was very instrumental on getting us there. And there was no correspondence back from our federal counterparts of public safety to speak to us. And we were there. And we actually attended the question period in our number one dress uniforms also to get the attention of the government. Public safety minister was there in question period, looking right at us and saying that we've been in contact with the Indigenous police chiefs. That was totally untrue, because that never happened. And it goes to show you that, they never reached out to us. They were silent throughout the whole process, didn't want to talk to us. And on June 12th is when we actually went there and spoke, and we all spoke at a press conference to let the government know that we would not sign a discriminatory terms of reference. And nowhere in my career did I ever think that I would be standing in front of people saying, taking on the federal government. Never in my career would I ever think that we would do that. The stress that the three of us felt throughout this entire process, including the chiefs, obviously, because we couldn't guarantee the safety of our communities. But the cause was so important because the goal of all this is not only for our communities, it's for every community across Canada and every First Nation police service across Canada, that you should not tolerate this, and nor should you put up with discriminatory terms and conditions of your funding agreements, and is why we did this. And it did show to the government, because the ruling was in our favor. And not only that ruling, but it's going to be discussed. There was other rulings from the Quebec case, basically saying the same thing, that they're being discriminatory to our police services. And historically, our people continue to be treated that way. And I think, with the three services, we started something, and I really strongly believe that this is going to spread to other First Nation police services across the country, because they're still encountering, and I just spoke with somebody today, I'm not going to mention the name, but they're encountering the same discriminatory discussions that Ontario wants to impose, saying this is what's best for you. So that's common, that both levels of government will always tell you what's best for your community. But we know ourselves, we know what's best for our community. And I just want to leave it at that, because I do have other, we do have other people that need to speak. But I just wanted to make that point that, we're not going to go away. We're going to continue on until we are treated like any other police service externally from the First Nation policing program. So thank you.
I want to provide some quick context to what these three services were challenging in particular. I mean, it's obvious big picture to say that it's inequitable and that your people aren't safe and you're not provided the resources. But when you actually look at the fine print of the mechanics of how they keep First Nations down, that's when hopefully the light bulb comes on and you start to understand how they do business. So all funding agreements in relation to policing have what are called terms and conditions that you're required to abide by. And on the, I hope everybody can see the PowerPoint slide, there were 3 terms and conditions that these 3 services are expected to sign on to, as are all of you. The prohibition, so the 3 terms that were of concern is that you are not allowed to expend monies on specialized units such as a canine unit, a forensic unit, domestic violence unit. You're not allowed to expend funds from the program on any specialized units. No domestic assault, no homicide unit, right? The second prohibition that you're not allowed to spend money on is any financing that relates to owning infrastructure. So unless you happen to be that rare community that has cash to own a building, you can't enter a mortgage. You cannot in any way use the funds under the funding agreements for policing across this country for the purposes of financing infrastructure, paying interest. Finally, and this is the one I really hate, there's a prohibition on being allowed to spend money on legal representation. Can you imagine? Seriously, though, and this is quite unbelievable, there is a prohibition to use funding for the purposes of legal advice on the interpretation, negotiation, or any dispute that relates to a funding agreement. Now, anyone who knows how Canada and Ontario operate, do you know the teams of lawyers they use that look at these agreements before they stick them in front of you? But yet, a term that each one of you who signs a funding agreement, you may not realize you're governed by is you're not allowed to expend dollars on legal counsel to give you advice to guide you through the process. So these 3 terms, these 3 services, along with the support of the Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario, were challenged. They were challenged in that these communities, these police services, the leadership said, we're not going to sign the funding agreement that comes up end of March. We're not going to sign as long as those terms exist. Canada's answer comes directly from their playbook. Their playbook is, well, we can relate to what you're saying. We understand. We really get it. Oh, if I could change it, I would. Oh, my Lord, it's terrible, right? You know, I hear you, right? But it's the terms and conditions, and oh, that requires a Treasury Board submission, and that's very complicated. We can't do anything about that, right? That's right out of their playbook. When the chiefs of police and the boards of the police services sought support from their political leadership to just say no, and you're going to pull up the page with the factum, please, to just say no, there was one political leader at a Grand Council Treaty 3, I mean, you know, he's the best looking one as well, that's of note, Chief Perot, and the quote that he said when Grand Council Treaty 3 voted to support, when they voted to support Treaty 3 police service in respect of just saying no, his quote is, and we put it on the front of our factum because it really resonated, quote, "What Canada is again asking us to do is administer our own misery." Chief Perot?
Miigwech, Julian. You know, after attending many meetings, that quote, I know I heard that somewhere before. but that's our reality, not only in policing, but in almost everything that we're trying to provide for our members and our communities. They fund us, you know, expecting us to administer our own misery. You know, when we were considering what to do about this, after many things have changed and the need for better policing services, to actually have our police treated as an essential service. You know, when it's run as a program, over the years I've seen our officers struggle with trying to cover large distances within Treaty 3 territory, and there was only a handful of them. Someone in Lac La Croix, you know, had to wait 3 hours before a police could get there, and then someone on Lake of the Woods near Morrison, Ontario. The distances that we have to travel in our territories, to police territories, and what effect that had on our officers. They're very dedicated. They're our own people, and it was just heartbreaking to see, you know, asking for more help. We need more resources. And Canada has always played this game with us, that holding a gun to our heads, saying that sign this agreement or you won't receive the funding. And for years and years, we did that. We wanted to make sure that we had some policing in our communities. But this time, we've come through a number of things, COVID being one of them, and the crisis in our communities, opioid crisis, and you know, the young people and older people that were committing suicide. All these things had built up, and the frustration that we felt in assemblies when we knew that our funding is going to run out in March. And I'm sure the other police services had the same meetings with the leadership. And I'm so thankful for the police board that we have, because they're members from each of our communities, and they do a very important job on our behalf. And along with them, and when they spoke to the leadership, you know, of course our first reaction is, well, I don't know, you know, we don't want to lose that funding, as bad as it is. But when we start hearing that, well, there's a possibility, they were speaking to the other boards, the other police services, then we just decided, you know what? It's time we said no. You need to fund our police as an essential service. And we said no, and we let that deadline pass. Then we, like Julian was saying, we took that to file that court case, and you know, just the human rights about it. And I think this is a strong message for us for anything that we're dealing with. When we stick together and say no to the discriminatory practices and tactics that both levels of government use on us. You know, this is an example of what can happen when we do stick together and fight for what we need in our community. So, miigwech, I just want to say that, and I want to thank all police chiefs and their boards for all the work that they did. Miigwech Julian for the work that you have done. And to all of the police officers out there that are on the ground in our communities, Chimigwech, Miigwech.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chief Mike from Magneto-One First Nation. I just want to keep the narrative going here and that as well as we keep moving forward with our presentation. You heard the layout of what's been happening here for all of our 3 First Nations services and that as well, and what we've had to do. So we strategized in that and what could be our next steps in that as well. And then we all decided that we would do declarations of emergencies in our community. And as chiefs and that as well, as you all know, that is a very difficult thing to do, to declare an emergency in your community like that. You know, it's tough, but what had to be done because we had to send a very strong message back to Ontario and Canada that their discriminatory practices against us can no longer be tolerated, especially when it comes to our safety in our communities. And this is where that the declarations of emergency were all made in our communities and started this coalition really moving forward on that path. And then by doing so, it created that unity. And we hear that word in here used a lot, but we are showing as well, but by doing so, we are creating that strength that's needed to fight back. And that's what we had to do. We had to fight back. So showing that unity and that strength, again, united, is having success. And we're having that success in the court. And it's unfortunate that we have to keep going to the courts, but that's where they're pushing us. They are not listening to our demands when we sit at these tables where they talk about reconciliation and equitable funding and that. Words. We need action. Our communities deserve better and they need that action today. We keep hearing about the disparities, you know, that our communities are facing as a result of that. This is the action and change that's required to force these governments to do that. So we, again, by showing that unity and asking for all our support of all our First Nations throughout Ontario, is sending a very clear message that this will not be tolerated no more. We have to stand up and fight back. Getting the court ruling and the decision that we did this summer is a very positive step. But again, it's pushing us again that we have to keep fighting back as we still can't get down to a terms of reference. Such a basic thing that you would think to start for negotiations. But yet we can't seem to get there. So again, you know, there's decisions that will have to be made again for all our communities as we keep moving this forward, because we're not done yet. The goal here is that we want to have equitable funding for all our policing in our communities. That means more officers, more resources on the ground where you need them most. We have heard you, we have heard you loud and clear, and that is what our fight is doing. We want to see that you have those resources in your community, no matter who's policing your community. And I'll pass it over to Chief for next.
Tribal Chair Corbier.
Well, when we're near the end, everybody said what they had to say, but I'm going to talk about it on a more personal issue in regards to police. For years and years and years, people don't support police. They don't understand the jobs that they do. They criticize them. They spit on them. They do a lot of things. They're here to keep our communities safe. When we look at what we had to deal with 2 governments, Ontario and Canada, it wasn't good. It's hard to deal with one government, the federal government, which we usually deal with. But when you look at what we did for the terms of reference, and they didn't accept it, it's been a year that we've moved on with this. They don't want to negotiate with First Nation police. They don't want to do anything. If you look at the topics that have been discussed here this week, it's all the same thing. We have to take them to court. And that's what we decided to do. Even our 3 police forces that decided not to sign their agreements, we did a memorandum of understanding between the 3 of us because we didn't know at that point if one was going to drop off and sign the agreement. So that was the strength that we put together, and everybody worked together to get to where they want to go. This talk about unity needs to stand up and be unified. We look at the Chiefs of Ontario. I was looking at that today. It should be the United Chiefs of Ontario. We need to quit taking bull. That's what we do. Chief Powis would say that at a meeting. Let's tired of the bull that we have to deal with. But we keep putting up with it, but we're not going anywhere. We're spinning our tires in these political organizations for years and years and years. We need everybody standing up for the police. 20, 30 years ago, we never had drug issues in our community like we do today. You look at the local papers, you see the obituaries, and you see how many kids between 25 and 35 are dying. And when you look at that, you see they're leaving in there, when you read the obituary, 3 or 4 kids are left behind with no parents. And it's a crisis. We did declare states of emergency within our First Nations. We have to. We need the state of emergency and all the funding that we get that we don't get from the government. They owe us. They have an unpaid invoice that they owe us. But we continue on that pattern. And I've been in politics for 33 years, 18 years as a council. I've been chief since 2011 in my community. But it's time for change. And unless we're going to stand up with each other and start supporting each other, we're going to be left behind. And what do we have for our future generations and our kids? They're going to have no resources. Yes, we're getting money through claims and stuff like that, but when you really actually look at it, we won't have communities if we keep going status quo in everything that we do instead of making a stand like we're doing as police. There's more than 3 police forces in Ontario. We need to start working together and getting what we need for our communities. We need more police officers, that's right. We need more funding. We have a police force at UCCM that they're packed in. They can't even breathe there anymore. You have cars sitting on the side of the road doing their reports of the UCCM police. Is that something we deserve? No, we don't. So let's move forward, stand together, and we're united, and I think that's what we need to do. If not, we might as well just go home. And I hope we have everybody's support in this room, even the 133 chiefs for Chiefs of Ontario. We have not even 50 chiefs here. We need all these communities to send support letters for what we're doing and join in, and we'll have successes. We're not going to have successes just sitting here. We have to move forward. So, miigwech.
Thank you, Tribal Chair Corbière. I want to just create a little clarity around the court case so you understand what decision the 3 services with the support of IPCO arrived at. First of all, on the eve of the expiry of their funding agreements, in other words, right before March 31st, when it was obvious Canada specifically, because frankly Ontario was more reasonable, but they just took Canada's lead, right? Canada refused to sign a terms of reference to guide the negotiations. All right? Canada refused to agree to even discuss or negotiate the terms and conditions, those racist terms that I showed you before. And they refused to have or agree to decision makers attending the negotiations. In other words, the most basic pieces you'd expect out of a negotiation, they refused. And why? Because they had no intention of negotiating. That's not my spin. Their intention was to sit down and say, this is what you get. That's not a negotiation, and that was their intention. So what the 3 services did in just saying no is obviously there was a recognition that in just saying no, they would be faced with the running out of funding. So they filed a complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, citing all of Canada's tactics. And does this sound familiar to folks? Canada waiting till the last minute to make a deal, and then saying we really need to get you your signatures to get you the money, right? Canada saying our hands are tied. We even have a slide that says our hands are tied. Do you have that one for me? They have what we call their playbook. They use it on everybody. They say, right? They say specifically, we cannot, our own rules tie our hands. We cannot, right, negotiate with you. Our hands are tied. They ignore any court rulings you bring to their attention and say, well, that's all fine, but these are my instructions. They deny any notion of negotiation because there's no decision makers that attend. Our hands are tied. So we filed a complaint and we went to court, and you can go back to page 26. We went to federal court for emergency relief on June 14th. And what's the emergency relief we sought? We asked the court to flow the funds consistent with the previous year and order Canada to negotiate in good faith. Now, is that a long shot? The answer is yes. That's a long shot. That's a long shot. Next page. Well, this is what the judge said in answer to the long shot. Public safety will therefore be ordered to immediately flow funds to each of Treaty 3 Police Service, Anishinaabeg Police Service, and UCCM for a 12-month period in a manner consistent with the policy, and at least the amounts flowed through the last tripartite agreements. For such 12-month period, Treaty 3 Police Service, APS, and UCCM will also be relieved from any obligation of compliance with the provisions contained in the terms and conditions. I won't lie, nobody was more shocked that we won than I was. What I'm trying, next slide, please. The court went on to say, public safety's insistence to maintain the existing terms and conditions has become the determinative element leading to the cessation of the funding. On that front, the evidence establishes that the terms and conditions attached, well, harder to read when you flip the page on me, the terms and conditions attached to the renewal of the funding agreements are unilaterally determined and imposed by Canada. Indeed, the late amendment made by Public Safety on June 24th confirms that Public Safety in Canada have total control on the contents of the terms and conditions. Ironically, Public Safety and the Minister repeatedly state that they continue to be constrained by the terms and conditions, whereas they themselves have the ability to amend them at will and can unilaterally modify what those constraints effectively are. And so the court rejected this nonsense that our hands are tied. The colonial rules created to keep you down are capable of being changed, and courts are recognizing that now. But the unity piece is essential. And the negotiations continue. For the first time, it took 12 months. Canada finally agreed to the terms and conditions proposed by the three services. The Canadian Human Rights Commission has referred the complaint about Canada's unconscionable bargaining tactics, their playbook. They've referred the complaint to a tribunal. In Quebec, all of the Quebec services have filed a separate concurrent human rights complaint. And so, therefore, there is a train to get on. And it's the train that is just say no. I'm going to ask Executive Director of the Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario, Kai Lu, to close.
When you pay a lawyer by the hour, and I'm told that I have 3 minutes or less, the message is reversed. But thank you. What you heard today is the vision of, or the message of unity. The Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario represents 9 Indigenous police services in this province, and collectively, they provide policing service or public safety service to 86 First Nation communities in Ontario. What we realize from the playbook is that the government will divide and conquer the police services boards and make us chiefs of police compete against each other for resources. And so in 2019, collectively, all 9 self-administered Indigenous police services, police chiefs got together and formed the association. And so now, when government provides funding to one organization, that funding arrangement is shared amongst the others. And the message that we like to leave is that for those that have police services that are self-administered, please encourage and continue to support, as you already have, those 9 individual self-administered services. Those that have police services that are under the management of the Ontario Provincial Police, those frontline officers receive the same challenges and work in the same systemic racist environment that all First Nations officers work under. And so it's important, and the message for the leadership here is the message of unity. Thank you.
And to close, I want to emphasize this. In 2013, 2014, you heard from Grand Chief Fiddler earlier today. In 2013 and 2014, NAN and NAPS, policing over 30 remote communities, said to Ontario and Canada, we're not signing another agreement if there isn't a table to create a legislative option. And you heard from Grand Chief Fiddler how that option is coming to reality because they said no. Everybody said, well, you know, they're policing remote communities. Nobody wants that job. That's leverage. Today what you're hearing is 3 services that police 45 communities being 55,000 people. The OPP can't manage it. That's leverage. You are the leverage. The unity is the leverage. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader. Respectfully, as an outsider, a Jamaican Polish settler, I need to emphasize the leverage is there for each and every one of you if you act together. So miigwech for listening to us, and it's been an honor. Thank you.
So miigwech to all of the panel and all of those boards and all of the people that brought all of this from 1 to Z, and we're still going. So miigwech, and we'll be following along with great hearts and support. Miigwech, miigwech, miigwech. Adam, your turn.
Okay, miigwech, thank you. Thank you, Vera. Microphone 2.
Good afternoon, Chief King, Gull Bay First Nation. I want to thank the panel and for that excellent presentation. Gull Bay First Nation is one of the ONF-NPA communities, and I think there are still 19 communities that are still governed under that body. Some of my colleagues sit here today. We had the very similar problems about the discriminatory practices that were levied against our communities. And I'm kind of wondering, because a lot of our communities refused to sign those agreements. We were told you must sign or you'll lose your funding. And a lot of the communities in unity said we're not going to sign them, we're going to hold out. And I think up to a year at one point, I'm not sure if Don is listening here, but a lot of our communities did not sign, and eventually, he's watching me, he says, but anyways, so, you know, we also held back on signing those agreements. And then, of course, they threaten you, lose your funding, you'll lose your police service, so obviously you capitulate to that at the end of the day. But December 6th of last year, 2022, we also launched a case in federal court arguing a Section 15 charter argument on equality and discrimination. And we're pursuing that as well. So I'm glad to see that, you know, and I guess the issue, and I think, you know, Julian hit the nail right on the head when he talked about unity, how First Nations can work together. And I commend, you know, the NAN Grand Chief, my friend over there that looks like me, when he took the stand and said, okay, well then we're not gonna, if you're not gonna change this, then you do the policing. I don't think the government of Ontario or Canada would ever go back to where you have OPP policing our communities. So I think that train has left the yard. So I think we're in a very good position, and whether it be this case, whether it be the negotiations through NAPS and through Gull Bay's case, I think we're going to see some results at the end of the day, because both the Quebec decisions and the latest one were wins in our favor. So miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, thank you, Chief King. So, Miigwech, the presenters, the panelists are still in the room listening intently, so Miigwech. So we will move along to the next agenda item. So we had shuffled things from the original agenda, but we're to, where are we? The supply chain and procurement. And I'm going to introduce Arvind Sharma. Oh, there is Arvind. So we do have a number of agenda items remaining for this afternoon, and then we wanted to get to resolutions, and we do have a number of resolutions to deal with. We've had lengthy discussions, so we were hoping to get back on track, and we'll give it to Arvind.
And just coming up after Adam there, I'm the good chairperson. If you will study your resolutions tonight, we'll do them all tomorrow.
Good afternoon, Annie. I am Arvind Sharma, Director of Economic Development at Chiefs of Ontario. I am here today to introduce the supply chain and procurement project being taken up by Chiefs of Ontario. This project is about mapping and developing a portal of First Nation businesses. We are working on this project, collaborating with OFNIDA on procurement side, and are hoping to work with NACA, who are planning to take up a similar kind of exercise in future. Need for data for the First Nations on different fronts cannot be understated. I would like to bring to your notice, for the sake of this project, that data will be controlled, stored, and secured with the First Nations through Chiefs of Ontario. Ontario First Nations need to have its own portal for the businesses of Ontario First Nations, and if needed, could connect to any national portal that would develop in the future. The Chief of Ontario, through Economic Development Sector, play a role in working with communities to develop tools and to address the economic opportunities and challenges. It also functions as a coordinating body for the First Nations in Ontario. A prosperity table was established to foster understanding and cooperation between First Nations and Government of Ontario in 2021. The prosperity table promotes economic growth in the First Nation communities, support economic partnership for First Nations with industry, capital pools, private sector businesses, and municipalities. It is from the Prosperity Table Initiative. A budget submission was made in January 2022 by the Chiefs of Ontario, and the outcome was the announcement of $25 million for First Nation economic development in October 22 by the province. The component of this grant covers loan for First Nation businesses and e-commerce support through Indigenous funding institutions, training and capacity support to First Nations for EGDEV officers through OFNIDA, and apprenticeship support through Indigenous training organizations that are in Ontario. The supply chain and procurement project for First Nation businesses also found a place in this announcement. The primary aim of this project is to support First Nation businesses by enhancing their visibility and accessibility to both the public and private sectors, thereby facilitating more opportunities for procurement of goods and services from these businesses. This will be achieved through the development of a comprehensive inventory of First Nation businesses and will culminate in creation of a publicly accessible online portal. It is important to understand why the need for the project. The need for the project is to understand the complex web of supply chain in goods and services for First Nations, realize supply chain gaps that were created there and further got created by the pandemic that followed, lack of comprehensive view of First Nation businesses network and supply chain map across Ontario, inability to locate experts and expertise in different fields and industries among First Nation businesses, lack of visibility and transparency and cross-referencing tools in procurement, lack of a First Nation controlled portal with wide, diligent acceptance of listing while remaining accurate. A government procurement projected in Canada is a $200+ billion with 5% procurement mandate announced in 2021. In order to take advantage, we need the right tools. IFSD presentation that will follow this one will further give details on this matter. Government procurement refers to all goods, services, and construction services purchased by government. It can range from office supplies to materials and services used in large infrastructure projects. The project objective is to develop a First Nation business supply chain map and portal. This will empower First Nation supply chain management while enabling better visibility for First Nations to connect and drive one another. It will also allow for better discovery of First Nation products and services offered by procurement agents, whether they are government or private. Communities and their businesses will also benefit from realizing gaps in industries, and entrepreneurs will also benefit by finding opportunities. First Nation businesses are at the core of this project. Their prosperity will undoubtedly result in prosperity of the people they serve and the communities they exist in. In turn, these communities will fuel entire First Nation prosperity and development in Ontario. While aligning of the project with national efforts, the project will benefit First Nation across the nation and meanwhile better integrate province in national procurement map. So for this work, the Chiefs of Ontario roped in the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracies to support the project after going through an RFP process. IFSD has a track record of excellence in public finance, economic analysis, and public policy problem solving. IFSD operates in compliance with OCAP principles that would be ownership, control, access, and possession, and has built trust and collaborative relationship in past First Nation projects that they have taken up. In early 2024, the Chiefs of Ontario, with support from IFSD and OFNIDA, will be approaching First Nations, economic development officers, and the businesses to participate in this project by sharing basic information about this project. Without any further delay, it is with pleasure that I introduce Jason Jackis, who, along with the rest of consultant team, has been working tirelessly with Chiefs of Ontario on this project. Jason is a senior fellow with Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa. Jason served as Director General at the Canadian Parliamentary Budget Office. He has also held various positions with Government of Canada Treasury Board, Secretariat, and the Bank of Canada. I welcome Jason to carry forward this presentation.
Thanks, Arvind. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to share a bit of knowledge that I have and also to receive the knowledge that you have with respect to not only procurement and business activity that's occurring across the province by very impressive and diligent First Nations businesses in your communities, but hopefully some ideas with respect to how to really drive that forward and improve things. As Arvind mentioned, my name is Jason Jakes. I am currently a visiting senior fellow with the Institute for Fiscal Studies and Democracy, which is really just kind of highfalutin, complicated acronym to say that we're the folks, potentially you know us better as the people that did some work with the Assembly of First Nations around the recent legal settlement around child and family services. So the $23.2 billion in retroactive compensation and the additional $20 billion on a go-forward basis, so more than a doubling of the funding that the Government of Canada has agreed to provide to support communities across the country and ensuring that those resources, communities are adequately resourced. So to use a previous quote, communities aren't forced to administer their own misery. I'd say potentially there's a bit of a more positive, there are kind of commonalities with respect to the previous presentation, although it's a little bit, potentially, hopefully a little bit more positive. And I think the commonality, and especially around this, okay. That's good. I can always project. Yeah. How about now? Yeah, that's better. I think one of the key commonalities, and if you take nothing else away, it's the idea that as communities, as the 133 communities across the province of Ontario, First Nation communities across the province of Ontario, you are most certainly stronger together. And that's what this supply chain project is really about. It's to answer a very simple question of what are the business activities that are actually occurring across the province. Somewhat surprisingly for us when we started on this was if you wanted to answer to that very simple question of what are the thousands of businesses across the country, across the province of Ontario that are actually engaging in business activities, what are they producing, who are they producing it for, and who are they employing? There's no easy way to answer that question right now. And that presents a couple of challenges. So first and foremost, it presents the challenge that when you're sitting down with the federal government or you're sitting down with the provincial government, when you're sitting down with the federal or provincial governments, similar to the key message around policing, potentially you don't have the data at your disposal to actually negotiate more effectively with them. And I know some of you have heard me say this before, but as Arvind mentioned, in one of my previous incarnations, when I was working for the Federal Department of Finance, one of my jobs was to prepare briefing materials when the CEOs of the major banks would come in, and the CEOs of the major banks would come fly up from Toronto, show up in Ottawa in $5,000 suits, very distinct from my Value Village suit. But they would come in armed with data and information, and they would talk about how many thousands of people that they employ, what their turnover was, and what their growth was. And hopefully coming out of this project, the Chiefs of Ontario and the people in your communities are going to be in a similar situation. So when you're actually sitting down with Minister Rickford, or you're sitting down with Minister Haiju, or the Prime Minister, you're in a much better situation to actually sit down and have those facts and figures at your disposal to engage in more assertive and hopefully more productive negotiation. So Arvind already touched on the opportunity. Most people in the room are familiar with what I would say, I don't know, the term game changer is kind of overused. I would say over the past 24 to 36 months, I would say like there have been two major changes, one of which are opportunities that really come to light for First Nations communities across the country. The first Arvind touched on, and that's the new 5% federal floor. So it's not a 5% federal target, it's a floor with respect to Indigenous, which of course includes First Nations, but it'd be great if First Nations, and especially in Ontario, could eat up as much of that space as possible. So 5% federal floor of annual spending, federal spending on procurement dedicated toward Indigenous firms across the country. Currently, the federal, so by our calculations, that's working out to several $1 billion a year. Currently, as most people are probably not surprised, the federal government is lagging behind on that target. So they're currently not hitting that target. And by our estimates, there's about an additional $1.5 billion that the federal government, that's billion with a B, a 1.5 with lots of zeros in the end, that they need to actually be spending on through procurement to Indigenous companies across the country, including First Nation companies in Ontario. And if you do a quick back of the envelope calculation, Ontario is about 40% of the population. So grosso modo, we're looking at around $600 million to $700 million worth of additional money annually that the federal government actually wants to flow through Indigenous businesses and First Nations businesses across the province of Ontario. So it ends up being a really great opportunity. Something else I'd highlight is the provincial government is also looking at something similar. So as most people are familiar with, there are currently similar policies. I would argue there's softer policies for the province of Ontario, so there is no firm target that the province has actually set in place. but they've indicated that they're willing and interested in moving in a similar direction. And with respect to the last point, I touched on that earlier, and that's very much the stronger together. So both stronger together from a collective point in terms of negotiations, but also stronger together because there are really good stories of successful First Nations businesses across the province of Ontario. And I would say, I was going to say for better or for worse, but for worse, not everybody in this room is familiar with them. And to the extent that people can be more, and the communities can be more familiar with those success stories, they can learn from that, they can grow more quickly, and they can avoid the challenges that other very successful First Nations businesses have faced in the past. The other point I'd make, which is not on this slide, and I know that everyone has already had a very long day and has a longer day ahead of them, but I would be remiss in mentioning something else that other folks are familiar with on the economic development side, and that's UNDRIP, right? So the United Nations UNDRIP, Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And in particular, so the province of British Columbia has passed legislation, the federal government's passed legislation, and as at least most of us in the room are familiar with, the big game changer on that front is now a legal obligation enshrined in law for not only the federal government, but any project that ends up being federally regulated or regulated in the province of Ontario to obtain consent from First Nations, right? So this is going to be, and again, it ends up being a game changer in other projects that we work on. We've heard it's a game changer because for the first time, it's not a situation where, similar to the example around policing, it's, well, you know, we'd really like to do this, and then you have to jump to playing hardball really quickly. And then if you're in a deplorable situation where the federal government doesn't want to negotiate, then you're going to the courts. In this situation, the federal government passed the legislation, right? So the legislation's in place. So again, it really does create a very different dynamic where if you want to open up a new mine, if you want to engage in some sort of natural resource activity, there's now a legal obligation in unambiguous clarity that these firms and businesses need to come to you, right? It's not them being nice anymore. It's the law. Do it. Make it happen. So Arvin touched on the ambit for this project. So this project is squarely focused around supply chain mapping and procurement, and again, really focused on the 5% for the federal government, and using that and hopefully leveraging that not only as an opportunity for public sector procurement, but hopefully, and something that you might have heard from other Indigenous financial institutions, hopefully leveraging that as an opportunity once firms are taking advantage of those opportunities, leveraging that as opportunities to sell across the country, like beyond the federal government. Because I can say from my own experience, the federal government isn't always necessarily the best customer. Occasionally they're complicated to work with. Our role with IFSD, my role is to support the Chiefs of Ontario as primarily around data collection. So on our end, our only real value added, I would say, is something that we have a lot of experience in, is collecting data, organizing data, and helping people analyze data so they make better decisions. So on our end, we're helping the Chiefs of Ontario collect the data, helping the Chiefs of Ontario organize the data, and then the Chiefs of Ontario very much have the data set. It's your data that hopefully you're going to share with yourselves, and then collectively you will end up using that data in such a way that both helps your firms in terms of economic development opportunities, and then hopefully you'll be in a position where you can use it for other opportunities as well. In terms of the approach, the first and foremost is just trying to get a sense of where are the firms. So the first bullet point around schema definition, effectively it's trying to figure out what data do we actually want at this point. And I would say it simply comes down to a question of, like, answering the very simple question of how many firms are there in your communities across the province that are engaging in economic activity? How many folks are they employing? How big are they? And what are they selling at this point? And more importantly, for the people in this room, the next obvious question is, how do you get them to sell more and create more opportunities, both on the employment side, but also on the revenue side, so on the profitability side. So providing communities with a growing, independent stream of revenues that are coming into your communities to give you more power and discretion around funding the services on communities that you want. I mentioned the data collection support, and I mentioned the portal development as well. So the first stage, absolutely by August 2024, if not sooner, an online portal supported by the Chiefs, led by the Chiefs of Ontario, online. So when the good folks in Ottawa are looking for the next First Nations firm in the province of Ontario that can provide a certain type of services, they can simply go to the portal, they can identify it, and they can follow up with that firm directly. And it's easy peasy. And something that we've heard up to this point from engaging with the good folks in the federal government and also the provincial government is that for whatever reason, they say it's too hard, too complicated to find First Nations businesses to provide supplies. We want to make sure that that's completely eliminated. So in terms of the project overview, I recognize that I'm running out of time because I can hear Arvin grumbling behind me. But in terms of the art of the possible, there's a hyperlink on this that works. You have a copy of the presentation. You can go through and play with it. We found data for the province of British Columbia. So we found detailed data on a public website with respect to First Nations firms in communities across the province of British Columbia. We took that, we dropped it onto an overlay for GIS mapping. And for us, we think that as a starting point, this is probably one of the easier ways, based upon consulting with businesses, talking to government. It might be a really easy way of actually interfacing with the data. And critically, I guess intuitively, most of us use Google Maps. So, I don't know, like, tell me who in the following area will provide this service. But then also, based upon the data that's being collected, you can cut it in any number of ways. So you can see, for this example, there's various industry sectors. So maybe you're looking for a specific type of firm that provides certain types of services. Potentially you're looking for firms that have experience in larger contracts. Potentially you're looking for firms that have certain types of accreditations. These are all ways in which you're going to be able to cut the data, or external people that want to find First Nations suppliers to give you profit margin so you can spend the money in your communities. Hopefully it makes it easier for them to do so. And it's only now when I look at this slide that I realize it's probably completely incomprehensible. But you know, what I'd say on this one is these are all the data that we're actually going to be putting together in the database. And the key thing to take away from this is, and I recognize some people in the room from a conference last month that the Chiefs of Ontario held with respect to data and data collection and data management. And I think the key thing to take away from this slide is in the green, so there are about 27 questions that we plan to ask firms, and they're really straightforward questions. What's the name of your company? Give us a phone number, give us a fax number, tell us where you're located, that type of thing. In the blue are other publicly available data sets, mostly collected by the government at this point, which we can actually link to. So all of a sudden, we're able to take the information shared by various firms across the province of Ontario in First Nations communities. The Chiefs of Ontario would be able to link with a larger data set, and collectively, it gives you a very, very powerful business analytics tool. It gives you a really powerful analytical tool that you can use to actually hopefully make better decisions on the economic development front. I'd say that we've run several folks through this just kind of to test in terms of the other groups that are out there that are actually administering portals and so what have you. And for the most part, I would say this ends up being the secret sauce around for the project for the Chiefs of Ontario. So in comparison, the portal's great. Don't get me wrong. The portal is outstanding. It's going to be great. I think it's definitely going to lead to additional business opportunities. I think it's definitely going to pull firms further together and pull First Nations communities across the province further together. I think having this type of data set available to folks within the Chiefs of Ontario and having this at your disposal and being able to know how many businesses, where are they, how quickly are they growing, how many people are they employing, and once contracts are coming up or once there are new policy or business opportunities, it gives you really powerful analytical support to do that. And with that, I will make my final pitch. So as Arvind mentioned, the kickoff for this is effectively starting next week in Thunder Bay. So there are 7 workshops, day-long workshops being held across the province of Ontario over the next 6 to 7 months or so. The kickoff is in Thunder Bay on the 29th, and the critical success factor of this project is data. So it's finding the firms, finding the directors of economic development in your communities, connecting them to the project, and helping them and supporting them and actually collecting the data and feeding it into the Chiefs of Ontario and Arvind's team so we can actually populate the portal overall. So to the extent that you can share the information, to the extent that you can connect us and connect the people that work on economic development in your communities with us and with this project, it's certainly appreciated. And I know potentially we don't have time for questions right now, but my contact information is there, and everybody has Arvind's contact information. As Arvind and I were saying this morning, and is often the case with many projects, we think that we're kind of going on, not only because the Chiefs of Ontario kind of framed this project, but also based upon the survey we've done. We think we're on a really good path right now, and we think it's definitely going to be successful. That said, we are very open to your suggestions and feedback because we have a good sense of what the portal looks like. We have a good sense of, once the Chiefs of Ontario have the data, how you can be using it to support your other economic development opportunities. And I think there are probably other opportunities or other ways in which you could use the data, and more importantly, like the network, right? Like once you have a portal with, say, 2,000 to 3,000 First Nations businesses on it, I'm sure you can imagine like any number of ways that you can actually build a more effective economic development network across the province overall. Anyway, with that, thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, I believe Arvind is happy to answer them, potentially with my support. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very in-depth presentation. Are there any questions? Either in the room or online? Okay, with that, any closing comments, Arvind? Just to wrap up?
Yeah, I certainly look for the support from all the chiefs here so that they can percolate this information to the businesses and to the EGDEB officers. Whenever we reach out to them, they participate in the project. It is the project for the First Nations. Ultimately, they are going to benefit from them, and we hope this will be a step for the economic prosperity. Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you very much to Arvind and the team for the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Vera for our next topic.
Right, miigwech. I'd like to invite for the gender-based violence and MMIWG action plan update, Nancy Johnson. Nancy, Director of Women's Initiatives.
Miigwech, Vera. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Donna, so glad you're here. I'm being joined by our knowledge keeper and elder and longtime member of the First Nations Women's Council, that's Donna Dubosky. Want to say anything? No. Okay. Bonjour. So, Miigwech, thank you so much for giving us some time today to share with you some notes. We're going to put them up on the screen, and I think we'll go through this fairly quickly. What I wanted to say is that I'd like to talk to you about the things I've learned the last couple years in this job in the Women's Initiative sector. And this is a new sector within the Chiefs of Ontario. And yet the work has been around for many, many years, and we know that. We've had the opportunity the last couple of years to have women chiefs and have conversations with our families of our missing loved ones and learn a lot from our communities that are trying to support more women in leadership, elected and unelected. So that's a little bit of what we want to talk about real quickly here. And we'll go to the next slide 3, please. I want to aim at that red dot. We made a red dot. We said, what is it that we're trying to do? We're a new sector. So we know that our Women's Council, and Donna remembers that the aim has always been looking at how our communities can help to end the violence, and especially the violence against women and girls. But as we talked and as the Women's Council shared with us, we also talked about overall safety, well-being, empowerment, leadership, getting into the economic development you just heard about. Some of those $700 million going to women that want to get into businesses on their own. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for a broader direction for our empowerment and our well-being of our communities. So, and we'll just quickly say on this slide that we are aiming at those things: the safety, the well-being, the empowerment of our communities. And our Women's Initiative sector works with our Women's Council, and we provide support to them. And they are guiding us in the initiatives that we take on. So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks. Just a little bit of the history. Our Women's Council is advisory council to Chiefs and Assembly, a permanent entity similar to the Young People's Council and the Knowledge Keepers Council, established in 2011, and aiming on those things we just were speaking about: well-being in the communities, ending the violence, moving toward empowerment. We'll go on to the next slide. The representatives are from all of the 4 PTOs. You can see that on the slide here, as well as Independent First Nations, Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, and 6 Nations of the Grand River. Mandate: support the collective work of our communities, promoting safety, well-being. We did review the terms of reference last year, and we updated them to reflect this broader direction overall. So we are doing a lot of recommendations. We don't have a Chiefs Committee. We work with the Women's Council and our sector within the Secretariat. So we don't have any resolutions right now. This is just information for you, but it's the responsibility of ourselves and the Women's Council to provide this update to the Chiefs and Assembly. So we'll go to the next slide. I want to take a moment right now just to acknowledge, I don't know, Donna is here, I'm not sure, I don't see any of our other members right now. If any of the other members of the Women's Council are in the room, please wave. I don't see them, they're all busy. They all wear many, many hats. Here are their names. I don't know if you can read that. It might be a little bit small. So we have Deputy Grand Chief Anna Betty Echnipaneskum from Anishinaabe Nation, and Loretta Shishigwin from Nan as well. Rebecca Timms from Anishinaabe Nation, Debbie Lipscomb from Grand Council Treaty 3, Sydney Lockwood from Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, Lyndia Jones from Independent First Nations, and Chief Joanne Swamp and Chief Sarah Daibo from Mohawk Council, Akwesasne, and Sandy Montour, 6 Nations of Grand River. We'll go to next slide. So this is something you'll see on the screen here, that in the work that we do, when it focuses on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, our elders have always reminded us to take a moment to commemorate, honor everyone we've lost. So that's what we do every time we have a conversation. Okay? Okay, we can go on. Thank you. We wanted to just flag that, over the years there have been a lot of resolutions passed by the Chiefs and Assembly. It's been really important that we know the work has been identified for a long, long time by the leadership. And in fact, that first resolution from 2010 was calling for a public inquiry into missing and murdered. It finally happened in 2016. Wanted to flag the one from 2013, the second one there, which is the Chief's Declaration. And to note for that reason, we have on our women's issues table copies of this same declaration that you all passed 10 years ago at the Assembly. And this declaration the Chief signed is for First Nations political leadership supporting ending violence and abuse in our communities and against our peoples. And it says, with our teachings, with our understanding of who we are in our communities, that what we're trying to do always is to remind ourselves of our values. And so those are to not tolerate violence and also to promote our own values of kindness, valuing each other. So if anybody wants a copy of the declaration, please go out to our table, Women's Initiatives. We did our little buttons here as well for the Assembly, which is kindness is our way. We have a little postcard, handy dandy postcard as well with the same image on it, just as a reminder. So that's what our council always promotes, is for us to remind and then share what has been taught over the years. Going on to the next slide, that we had 2 family gatherings during the National Inquiry, which our Women's Council members hosted, and that was to provide the support that the families needed and continue to need, because when we lose someone, we know that there needs to be healing, that's an ongoing issue. It's important to be able to find ways to get support from whatever sources we can to be healthy and to overcome and to live with the grief. So those family gatherings happened, and there was also, through the Assembly of First Nations in 2021, a regional engagement process, and our families participated, and they provided input that went right into a national action plan that was announced in 2021. So some of you will be aware, there were a total of 231 calls for justice from the National Inquiry into MMIWG. So that is a huge amount of work that needs to be done across Canada. And within Ontario, one of the resolutions noted that we wanted, the Chiefs in Assembly said, we want an Ontario-specific plan to implement those calls for justice. We still don't have that. We have a strategy by the Government of Ontario. We have a federal government approach. Maybe we can go on to the next slide. I'll talk about it a bit more, which is this one here. So on this slide, the first document on the left was the final report of the National Inquiry, and then the second one was the AFN's report for the National Action Plan. Then there was a third one, the decolonizing one, was our family's input in 2021. And then the next one, fourth one, is the federal government action plan. The fifth one is the Ontario government strategy, and there's some consistency, but they're all coming from different perspectives. And then the last one is the family gathering that we hold with our Women's Council. We held that gathering in 2022, January, and it was virtual because of COVID, but we had a lot of families talk about the things that are all connected to the violence and MMIWG and what we need to be doing. So they identified priorities, which is what has informed what we're doing. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay. And quickly, the list here, I'm not going to read them all. You can see them. It'll be in our presentation, but we know that our families have identified these same things in other processes as well. The need for land-based learning, culturally informed services, safe community programs and services, harm reduction, crisis support, safe transportation, support to navigate systems like the health system, the justice system, safety in media, etc. There's quite a bit there that they identified. And we'll go on to the next one, please. Thank you. So just as a reminder as well, when we did our family gathering, we wanted to have an artist share a logo. This one was done for us by Shar Hemlock, Cayuga Wolf Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River. And we have used this at our family gathering and in a lot of the work that we do as well to represent that beauty of that woman and the role that she plays and the love that surrounds her, but also that pain because of the violence. So, okay, and we'll go on. Thank you. Some of the priorities that we heard are families, because we had a lot of discussion. We had frontline workers join us for that family gathering as well, the one that was online. And a lot came out. They talked about trafficking, human trafficking, and the need for awareness and prevention. And they were even polled in one of our workshops, and they said to us in the poll, well, yeah, we know what human trafficking is. We understand what it is, but we don't know how to work with someone that's experienced that. We need training in how to deal with the things that that person has gone through. It's really complex. And they shared that we need to do more to support Two-Spirit, gender diversity, gender identity awareness. We know that in the communities we need to learn more, we need more resources and information. And we also don't have enough victim advocacy and support services, trauma support services. And we need a lot more land-based and culture-based programming. And we need support for men's healing as well. We need to support more youth in learning about healthy relationships. So there's so many things that they identified. Cultural safety training for police, healthcare, justice systems, and family supports and access to police and coroners, unfortunately, during a case that happens, and even afterwards as well, after an investigation. Grief and loss programming, grief recovery programs. We don't have enough of them. So these were our family's recommendations to us in 2021. It was really comprehensive. We'll go on, please. And then in 2022. And since then, again, we're a new sector. We just got started in 2021, but we've been growing. And we'll go on to the next one. Thank you. So we took all the input from everyone's comments and sort of identified some of the main priorities we would start working on. And so we then took that forward. First of all, we had a conversation with women chiefs in February 2022, just to make sure that that made sense from the perspective of the women leaders. And then we took it forward to Leadership Council in April 2022 and got this approved as, it's called, Ontario First Nations Gender-Based Violence Action Plan. And I'll just explain that if we go on to the next slide. So one of the things we said is, well, there's all these terms and all of these things that don't have definitions. What do we mean when we say LGBTQ? What does that mean? Let's talk about that. Where is a place to support that kind of information? We're in the process of trying to start to develop toolkits to provide that kind of information on our webpage, on Chiefs of Ontario website. Gender-based violence, what is gender-based violence? Why are we using that term? There's so many, terms that have come up over the years. We're also in our research, I'll mention in a minute, doing focused on intimate partner violence. So we're talking about in relationships there. And we know that women and men, everyone, all genders, experience violence from time to time. We also know that in First Nation communities, the rate of the violence is really, really high compared to elsewhere. And we do know that a lot of the violence that happens to women does happen in their relationships, not all. And we also know that that affects some men as well. But some of the violence that happens against men, just from the little bit of data we've seen so far, is oftentimes related to being taken into custody, for example. So there's different reasons for the violence against men oftentimes. So we're just aware of that, but our mandate from the chiefs and the resolutions have always said to include men and boys in all the research work that we're able to do, which we're just getting started. We talked here as well about need for men's healing program supports. So in 2021, we started a little safe space campaign with buttons just to begin a process of getting out positive messages about what we're hoping to support communities to do. And we'll go on from there. And if any of the Women's Council want to jump in and make any more comments, okay, no worries. Let me know. Okay. So again, some of these we've already talked about, more family healing supports, access to police and coroners, Victim support and advocacy, we're going to go through that in a moment. We'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so some of the things that we've been working on that are related to MMIWG and 2S+, so that's one of the ways that we're referring to all genders, is that we worked with a community committee. They're called the Ontario MMIWG T2S+ Loved Ones Commemorative Committee. They're a nonprofit group that just came together of families, supporting other families that have lost someone. And this image that you see here is one of the two beautiful monuments that they were able to get constructed. So this year in June, there was an unveiling ceremony at Whitefish River First Nation, and then again in October, the second monument was unveiled up in Kenora at the Rotary Peace Park. And so we were happy to be able to use a little bit of the funding from First Nations fundraising Who Is She campaign, and we used that to support some of the families' travel to attend one of those ceremonies. Okay, we'll go on from there. We participate on a provincial committee as well called the Indigenous Women's Advisory Council. Just to let you know, that committee is pan-Indigenous. It focuses on what Ontario is doing in response to the whole national action plan, and we provide input. However, what I would say is that it's only now that we're starting to get more information on some new initiatives that Ontario is starting to announce. And we're just right now going through a draft report that they shared with us to see, does that match up with our priorities that our families have identified for us? Because that's what's important to us. There's also a national roundtable that happened in January of this year. There's supposed to be another one coming up soon. The federal minister is convening that with the provincial ministers from all across Canada. The one that happened in January, First Nations really weren't even on the agenda. It was more urban-based. So we're hoping the next one gives us a chance to give them our list of what we want. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Thanks. Victim services, real quickly, that we are doing a research project now into the second phase. We did training sessions. We had almost 300 people from First Nations across Ontario join us for online training in risk assessment, danger assessment, and safety planning sessions. And those results, we analyzed all the feedback from a survey we did with people after they took the training. And the reason we're doing this is to help First Nations that are doing victim services work. What we want is to use the mainstream tools that are out there that a lot of people weren't even aware of and try to adapt them so that they make more sense in First Nation communities, so that they're more relevant and helpful as a tool. And ultimately what we hope is that once we have those tools put together as a package, that we'll also develop a system to help communities actually manage their data, manage that information. And we have a working group working with us, and of course the Women's Council is supporting us with that. So we'll just go to the next slide. It shows you just where we're at. We're in phase 2 right now, consultation and development of the tool, and that by next year we should be developing the management system, hopefully. Then we're going to want to try and pilot it in a few communities if possible. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. We don't have too many more. Leadership. Oh yeah, just to let everybody know, and if you've been to our table, you might have seen our report that looks like this. So this is called the First Nations Women's Leadership Summit 2023. This was the event that we had in March of this year. We had women chiefs, we had program managers, we had our women elders and our knowledge keepers with us. And the information that they shared was really, really helpful. This was based on a resolution 4118 from the chiefs. So I'll go on from there just to quickly say we're planning to do an event coming up next spring that's on economic development for women. So that's where the $700 million is going to come in. We are hoping that we will have First Nations women that are interested in starting a business or already in a business and successful, and any initiatives out there that want to share information on what they can offer to help, and women that are interested in getting into different types of employment, growing employment trends. We'll go on to the next couple slides and then we'll almost be done here pretty soon. Just to let you know, in this slide, it shows some of the feedback we got from women in leadership, and they were really clear that they see the role for women in leadership being important because of women's strengths, ability to nurture, and the way of looking at things, maybe in a different way than male leaders, but in a supportive way, in a complementary way, that's really an important part of any leadership process. So that's what the message was from them, that, you know, pre-colonization, there's always been a strong role for women leaders. That's what we want to see, want to go back to. We need more recognition of women leaders. We need women to be able to take care of themselves as leaders. So anybody wants that report, it's at the back there in our table, Women's Initiatives. And one or two more slides, I think. Just to let everybody know, we had a first opportunity to dialogue with a couple of the Ontario ministers in October, and hopefully we'll be going back to the table with them in January. And we will want, and we are right now, kind of fine-tuning our list of requests with them, because we know that from all the feedback, a lot of it is related to data and some of the same conversation from before about policing. When the previous speakers talked about those specialized policing agreements that don't allow our police services to get funding for a specialized unit on domestic assault, for example. And we know that we need that, and our families are saying that to us, that we need more supports for our police. So we'll go on to the next slide just to say that when we go back to the table in January, we hope we'll have more conversation on some of these priorities that are listed here. So for Attorney General, we're talking about victim support, and we're going to be pushing for free legal services and training of justice personnel. They are doing some of the training now, which is great, but we know our families and individuals that end up in the system, oftentimes because they can't afford the legal support. So we're pushing for those things. We're aware of some research they're doing right now on protection orders. We want to have a chance for First Nations to be at the table on that. We want to see more navigators and advocates for offenders as well as for the families. That's what our families have said to us, that it's important that we know that, the offenders are, for whatever reasons, probably in trauma themselves and need support as well as the families of the victims. So, and for Solicitor General, we are pushing the idea that's come up from families of having a missing persons alert. So just imagine a year from now, if you choose to sign in and opt in on this, then on your cell phone, you might get an alert every once in a while, kind of like an Amber Alert, but it would be optional. And the reason our Women's Council recommended it be optional is because they recognize that with the racism that is here in Ontario, even now, we don't want to create a system that's going to cause more backlash to our families and to our women. But if there were a system that could be optional like this, and that it would be First Nation specific and gender inclusive, so it would be for men as well, all genders, not just for women. So that's what our notion is here. And we want to support more community safety and anti-crime planning, and that means funding. Because every time we ask, where is the funding going for all of these different initiatives, nobody can give us an answer. They won't tell us who's getting what funding. And the little bit of information we do have is kind of all a big, broad roll-up, and we don't know even how much goes to First Nation communities versus other Indigenous communities. And that's what we're trying to support, is more community-based, long-term, sustainable funding. We ask for that every time we have meetings with Ontario. And a little bit more about human trafficking. We are supporting the First Nations Youth Council, the Young People's Council, and we got a little bit of funding that they will be utilizing in the spring to do a First Nations youth gathering on human trafficking, because some of the information on our table, if any of you picked it up, like this flyer, for example, it doesn't say in here, it talks about the signs of trafficking, but what it doesn't say is that from our research that half of the women in Canada who are trafficked are Indigenous women. But our population is about 4% of the women in Canada. So, but half, 50% are being trafficked are Indigenous women. So that's the problem. We are being targeted, and especially in Ontario, this is where most of the trafficking in Canada is occurring, is in Ontario. So that's why it's so urgent for us to be doing more. So that's why we'll share more information like this on our website as well as we get it. We'll do it more, as much as we can on that. Victims of violence, we talked about that coordination of data just simply because, as the police were saying, they have data, they're collecting information on domestic assault charges laid, for example. In our research, we saw that was the only indicator where you could compare across police services. And so we need to have more consistency in how research is done across the board. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Yeah, and the next one, please. And just really quickly, I'm going to wrap up by saying that we're going to continue to be supporting discussions at federal, provincial levels that relate to all those calls for justice, the National Action Plan, and we're going to be continuing to do the research that we're doing right now. And again, I just mentioned the Young People's Council, the work on the human trafficking. We're going to help them to develop a toolkit. They want to do it as like a social media campaign, which we think is the best way to reach more of our youth. And I think there's maybe one more slide after this. Okay, I mentioned the Economic Wellbeing Conference we're going to be doing for the spring. It's not going to be March the 5th to the 7th. It might be a bit later in March or else in April. We'll announce that in the next couple of weeks. And then the meetings with the ministers. And more information on the website. We want to support more Two-Spirit and gender diversity, and we want to do more outreach because at the AFN level, there's a 2S council. In many of the PTOs and communities, there's a 2S council. We don't have that yet at the Chiefs of Ontario, so we're hopeful that we can support a way to make that happen. And I think we're going to wrap up. There's my contact information if you need it. Donna, what did I forget? No, okay. Okay, is there any questions? If not, we're good? Okay, miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nance. Take a breath, have some water. You did an awesome job. I want to say miigwech for that. We do have somebody lost their keys to their room. Adam has them. And I'd like to now invite Adam to, or Caitlin, to do the next introduction of the agenda item.
Okay, so we're moving to our last agenda item of the day. As Vera mentioned earlier, we will be moving the resolution process that was supposed to take place this afternoon to tomorrow, day 3. So maybe just do a bit of homework about that tonight. But yeah, so our last agenda item here is going to be on the First Nation data governance strategy. So I'd like to call up Grand Chief Abram Benedict, Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, please.
Sego, good afternoon. I thought maybe for a moment I'd be standing in between you and the resolutions, and that I guess now it's me and dinner. And so as I made my way up, I told my friend Wilfred over there, because you know how he likes to go through questions and call about process and stuff. So Ava's keeping him very busy over there, so I can get through this presentation relatively quickly. My name is Abram Benedict. I'm the Grand Chief for the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, as well as I'm a member of the Leadership Council, and part of my role on the Leadership Council is a member of the Data Champion Advisory Committee. So on behalf of them, I'll be providing you with an update on the work that we've been doing. I did provide an update at the last assembly we had and provided a high level, So the Chiefs of Ontario is obviously our advocacy group, and the Chiefs of Ontario supports all First Nations as they assert our sovereignty, jurisdiction, and your chosen expression of nationhood, and specifically around data. That's what we're talking about. And the previous presenter talked a bit about the importance of data and some of the work that they're doing. There's a lot of different areas that data is being analyzed, brought together, is used, but there's not a synchronization of it. So it's important that we keep in mind with the wisdom of our elders and the future for our youth and the continued creation of our path forward in our nations, and whatever that may look like, that we continue to respect those processes in that creation forward. So you, the Chiefs in Assembly, had passed the resolution 2021-27, which established an interim data champion advisory committee and developed terms of reference. So that's what we work under. And there's a number of our members here today. Vera is one of them. My friend over there as well, Larry Salt, is a member of the committee, which I will share a bit more of who the members are again to refresh your memory. So the resolution that was passed endorsed the First Nation Data Governance Strategy as customized to Ontario's priorities and needs. So we know that there's a national strategy, but we also know that Ontario being very diverse, that our needs are quite different. So we're moving towards an Ontario-specific model. So support for existing forms of data governance until community consultation can take place. So I'll talk a bit about that more as well. And to report back yearly to the Chiefs in Assembly, which we've been doing quarterly. And this work will not prejudice or negatively impact any of the work that any nations may be doing already around research and data. So what we have completed to date is the Data Champion Advisory Committee was appointed in November 2021. We've had 8 meetings of the committee since that time. We provide regular updates, and we have had an opportunity to look at the health data landscape. We have a scan of that. And as you know, in health is a large area, and there's a lot of collection of data that's already there, and there's a number of surveys and studies that have went out. So there's data that exists around health that is available to us and to your nations, and many of you may have protocols for the access to that. So what we have in progress is awareness and communications to build upon the momentum of our conference that we held last month, and some of you may have been there as well, was the Powering Up Data Sovereignty Conference. We've been able to, as the Chiefs of Ontario, have secured 2 more hires. So it's been a challenge finding persons in the sector to apply, and then it's very competitive in all sectors. And as a community leader and as an organization in Akwesasne, we face that, and it's the same as we move towards on our data center development. So we've participated in the FNIGC, which is the First Nation Information Governance Center. We have a seat there at the executive leadership table, which took place on the 17th. And Carmen Jones, who works for the Chief's office as well, has a seat on the board there on our behalf as a region. So our data conference, Powering Up Data Sovereignty Conference, which took place just a couple weeks ago, had 245 registrants. It was 3 days of plenary and panel discussions, a number of group discussions, a very diverse group of people from leadership to academics to research, to persons involved in data, persons interested in data and research in our communities and community partners as well. So day one, we had the legend Gord Peters speak about the sovereignty of data in our communities and gave a perspective of how that, when we talk about data, we're not, we think just analytics, we think numbers, but Gord gave a great presentation to how that's important and how there's a history around that and how there's some real fundamental information available to us and has been for a long time. And really that's about how do we use that and advance our priorities as communities. So day 2 was Dr. Maggie Walters from the University of Tasmania spoke about the data sovereignty in a global context. And as we drive towards many of our nations and as a region drive towards self-determination, which is extremely important because data is important to our nations, important to us as a region, but also important that we protect that and make sure that we have proper protocols around that. And day 3 was Dr. Jennifer Walker, McMaster University, spoke about data literacy and the ways to achieve that. And again, sharing some of the best practices that exist in the sector and how we can relate that to the work that we're doing at the Data Champion, the Chiefs of Ontario, and ultimately in the region on your behalf. So the valuable learning experience for all of us that were participated. The cool research team has been working together to pull a report together so that we can share that moving forward. So some of the work that we're doing moving forward is building awareness via a dedicated web presence so that we can share that online as to what this work is we're doing, but also ongoing communications and in-person presentations to the Chiefs in Assembly, communities who are interested, who want to learn more, so that we ensure that everybody has an understanding, at least a high-level understanding of what we're moving towards in the region and how we can support each individual community or nations or organizations in the development. So we do have some partnership examples as well. The child and family service sector in Ontario has been working a lot around data as well as they move towards independence or nations controlling their child welfare. Data is extremely important in that. And so there's some opportunities there, and we do have some engagements that are happening. So there's collaborative planning for outreach in tribal councils and university research groups. We want to be able to tap into some of the research institutes that exist across Turtle Island or in the region to help us with moving forward. There's a lot of partners interested in helping us and lots of research groups available. So building data literacy through sector-specific webinars, again, sharing that information with leadership, with yourselves, with your community technicians on what the work we're doing and how we can support that. And information gathering workshops as well are being planned to explore data service needs and governance models. So again, how are we going to protect that data and how are we going to protect the research that we're doing and the information, embracing OCAP and making sure that our nations and our protocols are respected as well. So this is just a high level of our engagement plan over the next little while. We'll be engaging with the PTOs, the organizations, working with government partners where necessary to move this forward. We're promoting awareness of the FNDGS, collaboration with partners and gathering information. So we've got a lot of work to do on your behalf, and we'll continue to report that back to you. And again, a nice group of some good-looking people who make up the Data Champion Advisory Committee. These are the members. And then that's my last slide. I know the last presenter said, I think that's my last slide 3 times, but I know that this one is our last slide, and so contact information on there for you if you have any additional information as well. Carmen, myself, any of our committee members is available too to talk about the work that we're doing on your behalf. So yeah, I'll go for the opportunity.
And are there any last questions or comments for Grand Chief Benedict on the floor or on Zoom? Not on Zoom, not online. Okay. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. Okay, so miigwech for that presentation, Grand Chief. So since there are no more comments or concerns for any of the members here, then I'd like to call up Adam Fiddler, please.
Okay, miigwech. So on the agenda, we're going to deal with resolutions, but in light of the time, I know it's been a long day, really good discussions. What we will do is we'll move along. We'll have the elders and the youth reflections, and then we'll close for the day. So I'm going to invite Pierre Debasige to come up and do the youth reflections, and then if I can have Donna Debasige stand by. Actually, if you can come up as well to provide the elder reflections to close today's session. So with that, I will turn it over to Pierre.
Chimigwech there, Nitais. You're doing a great job today. And you've been doing a great job all week. To all of the proxies and counselors and chiefs that left as they were announcing the reflections, that's $10 to the Youth Council. I'm just kidding. So today was was filled with a lot of great information. As youth who has been involved for quite some time, I know I've learned quite a bit from the past 2 days. Of course, this morning not every day is perfect. You run behind schedule, you have some bumps. But the one thing that Chimigwech, thank you. The one thing that I took from today was early this morning. We had some bumps, we had some bickering, but that happens. As Anishinaabe, as First Nations, as Indigenous people, we're not perfect. Creator didn't make us perfect. We were meant to stumble. And one thing I wanted to say was the unity part. As elected leaders, as leaders in your communities, your families, and your homes, sometimes it's not about what's happening in this room right now. You got to come together, and I want to really thank the drum group that sang the AIM song today. And of course, there's a young Gima who jumped on the drum there. It was really nice to see. There's a lot of hardships that we're facing, and we continue to face on a day-to-day basis, and going forward, there's many fights to come. I know there's a great victory for the Indigenous police chiefs. It's amazing. I know I just went off a little tangent, almost threw myself off track. And I'm just going to reiterate, it's not about what happens in this room right now. There's some few people in here who have already seen my little boy running around at the Leadership Council, running around the hallway during lunchtime. That's who we're working for. Those ones. The little ones. Bless you. Oh. We're working for those guys. And of course the ones that have not yet come from the star world to be here with us and bring the gifts down. Just got to remember, our sacred teachings given to us by Gajemnado. Remember our staffs. Remember the drum, all the teachings and medicines in this room. So that's about it for me, is just remember who we are. We're all one people. We're trying to gain the same thing, the common goal, the better rights for our people and our youth, and of course the protection of our communities. So I hope today everybody had a good day. Hope to see everybody at sunrise tomorrow. I was looking a little short there. So again, I know it's been a long day and I'm starting to ramble, so Chimigwech, and let's keep up the good work and hard work. Chimigwech.
Busho, bebdik veden yenin digon shabe kwenda gigon to dem awe pshik yenin nginot magna. Nedom singin bin jaboy kan kong bin jaji kaboni audition kadi abin jakobni go. Mi se inti kwe mi gwechen ma and kenage mi gwechen nem kenashin da ye no ikwe bisinduik. Much of today's discussions, deliberations were in camera, so I don't really have too much in terms of reflections. But I just wanted to talk about how, today was such a good day to be Anishinaabe. It was a good day. The Knowledge Keepers met at noon. We talked about the need to revitalize our traditional protocols that were always such a big part of these conferences and assemblies in our meetings, and we need to do this to strengthen our organization. I want to say miigwech to the Toronto Council Fire, the drum group, for selecting the AIM song to raise our spirits back up, because it was a very difficult time, and as we talked about the earlier discussions, and together as we were reminded that kinagabeshgome, and of course that's something that we're always taught. We're always one. We go down Anishinaabe Nation. And miigwech, and I want to acknowledge our 6 Eagle staffs that stand here before us. They're the beautiful reminders of our people's of our people and reminders of our purpose and our shared history, and to unify us. You know, they worked hard all these yesterday and today to keep us in unity. And again, that song that brought us all together, it was just so fitting. And miigwech to our strong knowledge keepers who I sit with over there, who have only our best interests in mind at the forefront as we sit there listening to the presentations. And I want to acknowledge Morris, who has been faithfully sitting in the back over there, taking care of every one of us with his smudge and with his medicines, and cleansing our space here every morning. So miigwech, Morris. And I want to acknowledge and thank Pierre Nutais and Lance for taking care of us elders as we sit there, our knowledge keepers, and making sure that we were comfortable and that we had, refreshments as we needed. And you were doing an extremely wonderful job, very attentive and helpful to us. So miigwech to you and Lance, Pierre and Lance. So with that, those are my comments, and miigwech to everyone.
Miigwech for the closing reflections from Elder Knowledge Keeper Donna Debasige and Pierre Debasige with the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council. A couple of announcements. Reminder, please support the crafters that are out in the lobby, out in the hall. A number of vendors that are out there. Also, the Young People's Council was doing some fundraising. Do you still have a booth out there? Tomorrow? Okay. Reminder, the Young People's Council is doing fundraising. They do have a booth out there tomorrow. If you can help them out, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, tonight, there is a screening of the film Into the Weeds. That'll be shown at 6:30 in the Churchill Room. They will be having some snacks, but there will also be a Q&A with the director of the film, Jennifer, I hope I get this last name right? Bikewell? Jennifer Bikewell is the director. She will be there to answer any questions and have a discussion on the film. Really good reviews we're hearing. So that's at 6:30 in the Churchill Room. Reminder, when we're following the agenda, the opening took place the morning of day one. The closing with the closing song closes with the posting or the retiring of the flags takes place at the end of day three. So we don't normally have the drum or a closing at the end of each day. But I think the drum was willing or wanted to render a song, but I don't see the group here. But again, there will be the official closing with the drum at the end of day three. So I don't see the group here. With that closes day two, and we will see you all tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Miigwech. 6 o'clock sunrise ceremony. Thank you for the reminder. 6 o'clock sunrise ceremony.